United States President Donald Trump follows through on his threat to impose tariffs on Canadian goods and services flowing into the United States. Canadians are panicking everywhere, but this is a golden opportunity for the country. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Donald Trump has imposed the tariffs that he said he was going to impose. And before I explain to you how this is an excellent move for Canadians, I want you to understand that it's not going to be easy. It's not an easy move. And I know that's hard for some of the generation coming up behind me to understand that, you're going to have to work for it, that it's going to take determination and hard work, and you're going to have to make sacrifices. And in the end, the country should come out of it in a much better condition. And I will get into that in a second, but beforehand, don't blame Donald Trump. This is not the problem. The problem isn't that Donald Trump is putting tariffs on any Canadian or Chinese or Mexican product coming into the United States. The problem is that Canada, because of the far left liberal government, they're Marxist in their totalitarian desire to have everything be a monopoly that's controlled specifically by Ottawa. That has brought us to the point where we have only one customer. And now that customer has decided that they don't want to do as much business with us anymore. And if they do want to do as much business, it's going to cost us more. That's what we really need to be talking about. We need to be talking about the internal economy of Canada is terrible. Anybody who had been paying attention that wasn't trying to be ideological would have understood that this was coming. When you hear the Conservatives talk about how all the industry has been chased down to the United States, let me explain how that works. Let me break that down for you. I own a business. I'm manufacturing something in Canada. The federal government comes to me and says, oh, you're breaking the green rules. Now you have to put this carbon tax on your product. That product now will become that much more expensive in the store. Everybody will buy it. And you're turning around, you're saying, yeah, but then they can buy the one from China much cheaper. They can buy the one from the United States much cheaper. Federal government says, I don't care. We're going to go green. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it. Apparently, there's a volcano somewhere that we're dumping buckets of Canadian dollars into that's making the planet happy. Of course, any smart business person will say to themselves, well, let me go and do the exact same job. I will manufacture it. I will do this exact same thing where they don't charge me as much money to operate. And that, for Canadians, that is the United States. So then they manufacture the product in the United States and they make it they drive it up to Canada for, even if it's the same money, they're still making more and they have less oversight and regulation. Only the Conservatives have been trying to point this out. The Liberals have been trying to tell you that this is going to make your life better. And as you can see, it's not going to make your life better. Now that our only customer is gone, they're trying to tell you that it's an attack on Canada. Defending yourself, defending his own country is not an attack on us any more than it's an attack on China or Mexico. What you want to be asking yourself is, how come we can't pick up the slack like China and Mexico? How come we don't have other markets? How come we don't have even an internal market? How come British Columbia wine is more expensive in Manitoba than it is in Oregon? These are the kinds of questions that Canadians need to be asking. Now, the only one who seems to be talking about it correctly without trying to beat the drum of war and try to make you think that somehow we're going to get into a big fight with them, which is, of course, absurd. We need to stop worrying about what the Americans are doing and start worrying about what the Canadian government is doing. All levels of it.
I want you to know that I will fight for you. I will fight for your job. I will fight for your family. I will fight for your chance at owning and paying off a home, and I will fight for your retirement. And I will fight to put Canada first. Before these tariffs, you were already suffering. You wondered how you'd pay the rent, or eventually dream of buying a home after housing costs had doubled over the last decade, rising faster than in any other G7 country. You've downgraded your diet as food prices have risen 37% faster in Canada than in the United States over the last 5 years. You might be one of the 2 million people, a record-breaking number, lined up at food banks, a number that has more than doubled before these tariffs applied.
Of course, any of you out there that are not ideologically driven noticed all of those things. You saw your savings shrinking. You saw you not doing as many things, that your children weren't going to all of the different after school programs or the weekend programs, that you had to cut back on how many hockey tournaments you could go to. Of course, you noticed all of that. You saw that your dollar wasn't going as far. You saw that only a very select few, like Mark Carney and his elitist friends, were getting rich, while the rest of you were struggling, and all of your savings was going out the window. You saw how you got out of high school, and now the only way you can live is either live with your parents or live with 4 or 5 roommates. You saw that when you first got to this country, you had to get crammed into a basement with 26 other people, making some guy rich while he laughed at you. You saw all of that. You're aware of all of that. The Liberal government didn't care. How many times did they stand up in the House of Commons and tell the Conservatives that they were some kind of phobists because they talked about having less regulation on jobs, on housing, on everything? How many times did the Liberals try to explain to you that the carbon tax wasn't costing you more money, and yet now they want you to believe that the tariffs will cost you more money? What's the difference between a tax and a tariff? I'll tell you, the only difference is that it's coming from you're applying it onto another company, another country. That's all. That's the only difference. It's still just a tax. It's still just a tariff. The Liberal government has taken away all of the internal economy, has made it impossible to start a new business. And that's something we have to focus on. We have to ask ourselves, how can we restart our economy? How can we go through the 2 years of growing pains if we're not allowed to put in a new building, if we're not allowed to manufacture any products in this country without the Liberal government taking 2 years to approve it?
All these things, axing taxes, building homes, unleashing construction of our resources, fixing the budget, stopping crime, all of these things were conservative fixations before the tariffs. Now they are even more necessary.
Now we see that the Liberal policies have brought us to the point where we have nobody to sell our products to. We can't sell them to each other. So because we can't sell them to each other, and the United States has decided that everything that goes into the United States is going to be more expensive, they're panicking. They're losing their minds. They're running around like their hair's on fire. They don't have any solutions. They haven't even been trying to make any solutions because they don't want any entrepreneurs. They don't want any middle class. They don't want any business and industry that's open to them without their strict permission. They want monopolies all over the country. They're talking about making 5 million homes with one home building organization. That's the way that they're looking at it. And now Mark Carney's talking about how he wants to open up a new pipeline to the east, and he's just going to use it. Just give me emergency power, and I will be able to do everything I say that I was going to do. But you had opportunity to do it. And the last time that people gave emergency power, bank accounts got frozen, and car insurance was taken away. I mean, every time I turn around, there's a dictator asking for emergency power. Even the little guy with the mustache in Central Europe in the 1930s, he also took emergency power. And the first thing he did was destroy all the newspapers that didn't agree with him. Now, doesn't that sound like something that's already transpiring? The economy is been driven by the same basic tenements since as far back as we can remember. Printing more money is not going to solve the problem. And locking down the entrepreneur, the middle class, the young guy who wants to just start a business, and even if he only is able to sell this product to his little region, he doesn't have to be a corporation. That's the answer to the problem. That's the solution. Taking the money, instead of giving it to one corporation and giving it to 35 home builders, all of them building only 2 or 3 homes, let's say at a time, in one particular region. Not high-rise buildings where they need overhead cranes and a million kinds of overhead. Nobody wants to live like that. If people wanted to live like that, they would be saying to themselves, oh, let me go live like that in Toronto. People want to live, they want to work hard, they want to have their little piece of the pie, and that's the dream that should be the Canadian dream. That's the thing that we should be focusing on, not allowing the Liberal government to try and tell you that it's the state of the country is not their fault. It is absolutely their fault. We wouldn't be in this problem if they had allowed for us to build pipelines that would sell our product to Japan, who now buys that. I mean, think about the idea that they said there was no market for the Japanese to get the LNG, and we sell that LNG to America, who then turns it into LNG, like we sell it as crude, and then they turn it into LNG in Louisiana, put it on a boat, sell it through the Panama Canal, and they give it to Japan. Japan just signed a deal with them because the Liberal government doesn't want any kind of freedom that way. They want all of the lines going to them. And as a result of that, we are now in a situation where we are all staring down the barrel of some pretty hard times. If we can get the liberal government out of the way, if we can get the regulation out of the way, it'll just allow us to do our work without you sticking your nose in every aspect of our life, then you will, two things will happen. The liberal government will lose control of the country, which of course that's something that the far left cannot withstand. Their mind is just control freak, control freak, control freak. And the other thing that will happen is that we will have the greatest middle class in Canadian history. All of these people, and Canada's full of them, they're only one generation removed from people that struggled in their home country and then came to Canada. At most, they can point to their grandmother and say it. I mean, at least 50% of the country can say that. They can say that my grandmother had to do a hard time in their country, so they came to Canada to give us a better way of living. Now the liberal government has taken all of that away. Now the liberal government wants the middle class to shrink, shrink, shrink. Oh, they say all kinds of empty platitudes. They say all kinds of things that make that sound right, but they don't actually apply, right? They don't do anything to that. We have a government that has done nothing for months while they run around and try to fix their own house. Now Carney's going to try and tell you that you got to give him emergency power so that he can go ahead and take control of every aspect of your life, destroy any hope you have for freedom and independence, because it'll all be an emergency, and then go ahead and turn this country into what communist Russia looked like, what the USSR looked like, what China currently looks like. They have no problem trying to tell you that you're not allowed to do business with Russia, and they will take money from Russians, but they do business with China all the time. A lot of Carney's money comes out of China. China is the ally of Russia, so when you do business with China, you're doing business with Russia. Now, that's a different video. I just want you to understand that none of that is Canada doing business, because they say to you, oh, you're not allowed to smelt any product. You're not allowed to make any new product. We pull the aluminum out of Canada. They smelt it in the United States, send it back to Canada, and manufacture, say a can, or they manufacture many of the things that aluminum is a very abundant mineral. It's a very abundant material. And so the way that it works is we take the raw material out of Canada, we send it down to the United States. That's half of that. That's part of that $500 billion that have gone south, because the liberal government came to you and said, oh, no, you can't do that here. You're not allowed to do that here. That product is too noisy. That product is too dirty. That product is something. And all of a sudden we need you to do more and more and more and more and more and more and more. You have to pay for the most expensive electricity on the face of the earth, because that way there we can tell the world that we're green. I don't know who the world is that they want, that we care what they think about our economy. I don't know who these people are that think that we can pay for, like, we can just give more of a tax, and all of a sudden our non-green businesses are doing better. None of that makes any sense to me, because money can't solve this problem. And that's something that we have to consider. We have to consider that by giving the middle class all of the jobs, we can now give more money, we can generate a larger income, and we can have an internal economy. Instead of everybody living in the same 5 cities, we can spread out. We can say to ourselves, okay, we're going to get timber from here, and we're going to ship it down to Toronto, or outskirts of Toronto. We're going to get timber from here, and we're going to ship it over to Edmonton. We're going to get timber from here, and we're going to ship it up to where they're building a couple of those new electrical plants that are going to entice the AI companies to come here. We're going to do all of that stuff, but we can't do it with the liberal government in the way. That's the thing. That's the issue. The regulations of the Bill C-69, the regulations of all of the carbon tax, all of the green agenda that's in the way, the regulations and the bureaucracy and the government. You can look at the state of Argentina, and everybody was like, oh, Argentina is never going to survive. And now their economy is doing much better. It's not great. It's not there yet. I mean, you can't undo 20 years of damage in 12 calendar months, but he has taken his inflation rate from 25% down to almost 3%. And that's something right there. And he did it by cutting out a lot of the government. So now that money is not running around putting in people's pockets, and all those people need jobs. The people that you cut out the government, all of a sudden they're going to find something to do. Well, they're going to find something to do, and that by doing is going to generate the economy. Instead of taking from the taxpayer for their paycheck, they're actually out there generating money. And in 2 years from now, that'll be one of the strongest economies in the Central to Southern America. And Donald Trump is doing the exact same thing. He's cutting all the government waste, and he's bringing in industry. And that's exactly what Canada needs to be doing. We need to be telling ourselves, now I understand that we can't necessarily be, get Quebec to overload Ontario with their dairy, or Ontario to overload, Prince Edward Island with their grain, or any of that stuff. But there are products manufactured in, say, India that are made out of all the same things that we make in Canada. How come it is that the Canadian population can't manufacture those things? As an example, and I'm not throwing shade on India, I'm just saying to you that you can walk around right now, go down into a Walmart, and you can see a product that's made in India, and you look at it and you're like, well, we make all those things here. So why can't we just turn this in? Why can't somebody in Canada manufacture a Canadian version of this product? I'm thinking in my head food, you know. And I get that there are some things that, you know, you're going to import it. I'm not saying to you any otherwise. What I am saying to you is that we don't make a lot of it in Canada because the federal government doesn't want you to go non-green. They want to control it. And they thought in their minds that the cash cow of the United States would never close on them, but they were wrong. And in their short-sightedness, they have overlooked the problem that Canadians right now are doing without because their policies have stopped manufacturing. It's manufacturing that we need. That is the secret. That's the clue. That's the part that's missing. We get these products from China because they were manufactured there. They were manufactured in the United States. They were manufactured in India. They were manufactured somewhere else. And as a result, we don't have any internal economy. We don't say, oh, this, you know, we're buying this from Saskatchewan because Saskatchewan made it. We're buying this from PEI because PEI made it. I mean, we buy PEI potatoes, but that's just the example I'm just trying to make. We're buying this from Newfoundland because Newfoundland made it. Not because of any other reason, but because it was made in Canada by Canadians for other Canadians. And we're going to have an internal economy flowing, and we're going to have all of the things that are necessary to make it so that nobody can harm us by saying to you, your product is going to cost us more money. Think of the idea that all he said was your product in this country is going to have cost more money, and every businessman and every politician is losing their mind. Now, I know me and you down here on the ground, we think to ourselves, well, what's the big deal? But there's a big deal. It's going to be a lot of growing pains. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. It is absolutely going to cost growing pains, and we cannot start the process so long as the Liberal government is in the way. So long as there is any government in the way that wants to tell you that the free enterprise is not the solution to the problem. And we know that Mark Carney doesn't believe in free enterprise. It's funny how he wanted free enterprise when he looks for investments in the United States where he puts his company. But in Canada, you are not allowed to have free enterprise. You need to pay high energy rates so that you can tell the world that you're green. And yet I wonder how much money Mark Carney has invested in energy production in Brazil and in Saudi Arabia. And examples that go along with the side of that. I'm going to have to keep talking about this issue. But the thing that we, as me and you, have to understand is that this is an opportunity for Canadians to buckle down, do the hard work that needs to be done to make this country who it is, what it is, and what it needs to be, so that we not are begging the United States to allow us into their market and get their money, but we can rival them by saying, hey, we got our own product. Why don't you, some of you, move up here? Why don't you come on up to Canada? We got the room, and we're building houses by the millions. Not high-rise apartments, not all crammed into the same 4 streets. Not, oh, you're not allowed to drive a car. Everybody's going to have to take rollerblades in 3 feet of snow. None of that's far left liberal stuff. All of that we need to be doing right now is opening up the taps. We need to be mimicking what's going on in these countries. We need to be telling ourselves that's the way that they're all making money, so why can't we make that kind of money? Because if we had those things in place, we would be able to look at the United States like, say, Mexico has and say, well, yes, some of our businesses are going to be okay, but our economy is not going to collapse down around us. Canada cannot say that. Canada right now is looking at some serious problems because we don't have, not because of what Trump has done, but because we don't have an internalized economy, because we don't have anything that's, we say, oh, it's made in Canada. We have a lot of stuff that's put together in Canada. We have a lot of products where we buy it from somewhere else and then we put it together in a factory. And like we put it together, you know, like in the case of, say, food, we buy all of our Mexican tomatoes and then we say, oh, look, packaged in Canada. But we don't put Canadian tomatoes in the product in some of the things that I'm examples. And the point that I'm trying to make is that yes, it will be difficult, but we have a golden opportunity right now to realize now that Donald Trump, who's done us a favor in a way, has shone a light on how fragile our economy is without the participation of another country. Never mind. It's not even about what country. It's the simple fact that without this other entire country, our country cannot survive. Can you imagine in your mind how that's anything but dangerous? All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want you to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with all of your friends. I'm very coming up pretty heavily against the censorship of the CRTC and Liberal Government Bill C-18. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time.